Hi, this is Duke. Today is Sunday, October 24th. Chet and I are here, back on Spalding Road. Same area as where this picture was taken for the USGS study that was conducted in 2019. That picture was taken in about the month of June. As you can see, the road isn't flooded still. The ditches are dry. If you recall from the last videos, Dyke 6 Voyage hasn't had boards in it since May of 2020. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of where we'll be going today, well, let's try to keep all our maps here from the wind. At the moment, we are located on Spalding Road, right about here at Paul Stavney's. We'll be going up to Pete Nelson Road and down to Dyke 6, over to Dyke 6 Voyage. And we'll be making a visit at Dyke 9 Voyage, which is also referenced as Erickson Voyage. Roxy and Ice property will be here. So just as a little bit of an idea here on how the Crex operates, County Road F here serves as a divider between the Crex Meadows and private property. Private property in this area is affected by the Crex Meadows. Right here at Dyke 1 Voyage, there's a diversion pump. That diversion pump sucks water that's out of this drainage ditch, brings it up to a higher elevation, and then they use that water in gravity to fill all these flowages artificially. Now, nobody's advocating to get rid of the Crex Meadows, that's for sure. But in recent years, they've been keeping more and more water in these flowages. And when they raise the water in those flowages, it raised the groundwater table over here. And the USGS study that was conducted in 2019, and there was one conducted in the mid-80s, presented in 90, say that it's likely due to precipitation that we're seeing flooding problems. I disagree with that, and so do all the residents. Chad and I have taken a lot of time in studying not only the 2016 Crex Master Plan, that's what they used to manage the Glacier Lake Grand Prix properties, which is Crex Meadows, Fish Lake, and Amsterdam Sloughs. I've also studied the 2016 water quality assessment that was conducted by Craig Ressler. He's a retired water expert with the DNR. This is the 1990 water study. We're going to talk about this a little later. I'm going to show you why I feel that the DNR has established a pattern of distrust on this issue. I've also studied the DNR Groundwater Study Guide. Burnett County Land and Water Resources Management Plan. This is a basic groundwater hydrology study paper. It's an excellent document. It talks about lithology of soil, well construction, all kinds of things. This is an original 1990 study, which had some pretty cool things in it I'm going to show you later. And then of course, the 2019 study. You know, through all my education on this topic, I kind of wish that it would have taken me down a path to show me that the DNR is right, and the USGS is right, that it doesn't affect private property with them raising water elevations. But that isn't the route it's taken me. So let's head on over to Dyke 6 Voyage and we'll get started. Okay, Chet and I are here at Dyke 6 Voyage, and I misspoke in my last segment. I said that there weren't any boards in Dyke 6 Voyage. Actually, there is a board in it. It's just that it's not really holding back any water right now. And it hasn't been since, there hasn't been any boards in this structure since basically May of 2020. They did have one board in there at times. But nonetheless, water elevation has been way down. And let's go back over here again. And I want to show, hi, how are you? Well. The water elevation is kept track of here by the staff gauge. I've seen it as high as 7.8. And so it's a huge different elevation in water than what's normally been there in past years. Well, Chet and I are still here at Dyke 6 Voyage. He wanted to get out of the wind. Looks like he stepped on my heel here. But anyways, page 12 of the 2019 USGS study has a really important passage. And this will make and break basically this whole project. In that passage, they're making the comment that the groundwater table and the flowages aren't connected. they're stating that the flowage is perched a foot above the groundwater table. And that's not true. I don't think it's factual. And I'm going to tell you why. The USGS well was located right over here. I mentioned that in the previous videos. How they set their datum on their well is they find out what the ground elevation is where the well is put, and they measure down from there to determine what the water elevation is. Well, what I've never disclosed to anybody before, that I'll disclose today, is I had a well right over there. The top of the well casing in my well matched up with that staff gauge over there on the concrete structure. So going back over to this well, when they uploaded their groundwater elevations onto the USGS Groundwater Watch website, I noticed that their elevations looked a little odd, a little off. So I came up here with my transit. I verified that my well was set up correctly, and I shot the elevations of their well. Their well ground elevation reported at 935.8 was off about 10.5 inches. So back at our 2019 study here, I'm going to go back a couple pages. And here's where they have a graph on well 1, which was located here at Dyke 6 flowage. The dotted line represents the surface water elevation of Dyke 6 flowage itself, like the water you see. The solid blue line represents the groundwater elevation. And they're showing them to be off roughly a foot. Well, if their elevation, their datum set on their well isn't correct, this can't be correct. Now, when I noticed this, I called the USGS. I talked to the person in charge of the field work and the study here. I was told that they weren't going to really be looking at the flowage elevations. They were going to be looking at the difference in elevations between well 1 and the other 11 test wells. So I thought, oh, no big deal. No big deal at all, because really we're looking for a net change. And I agree with that between well 1 and everywhere else. But lo and behold, when the study came out, they have them in here, and that's not a factual graph. Okay, so Chet and I are here at Dyke 9 flowage. And as a reminder, Dyke 9 flowage is also referenced as Erickson flowage. We're right here right now. Dyke 6 flowage is right up here. Rocks and Ice Properties, we own this 40-acre parcel in the corner, and we own these two little 10-acre parcels here. And we're going to walk over and talk about the structure right here at Dyke 9 flowage for a second. All right. Here it is. Oh, this is kind of a neat thing to talk about. Boards are in here right now. The DNR let me know they were going to be putting boards in. And I asked them not to put boards in. And of course, I told my neighbors what was up. Well, when they put boards in, there were boards taken out of here. I didn't do it, but they were removed. So the DNR responded by putting this locking structure and padlock. Well, I've talked to a few law enforcement officers with the DNR, conservation officers, I guess, and they let me know that anybody cutting that lock off or removing boards or what have you, they'd be charged with a felony. That's pretty serious. I'm not too much of a wuss to take them out, but at the same time, you can't finish the game if you're not in the game. All right, so let's talk about these boards. Right now, they've got 4 boards in here. Each of the boards is a rough cut 2x6. So it totals about 2 feet of water. We're going to be talking about that 2 feet of water here in a little while. But the DNR has cited statute 31.02 as being their authority to operate this dam. Well, I've read that chapter 31 pretty closely, and there are some pretty, solid requirements. They have to have a staff gauge, they have to maintain it, keep a log on it, all those sort of things. Well, if you remember from my past videos, this staff gauge wasn't here until after I started my water project in 2018. And yep, we are going on, we're over 3 years now. So the staff gauge is new. They never had one here, and it wasn't maintained at all. If you remember from them videos, the water was pretty much right up the edge of that road right there, County Road F. So what's been happening for residents is there are large bodies of water that are created on people's property through this grounded surface water flooding. And if you study a little bit about water in ponds, you really don't own the water. It's public. You own the property underneath the pond, that's created, but you don't own the water. That's considered state area. Well, I'm on a reminder of conservation officers. I think they took an oath to defend the Constitution. And if you're creating public water on private property, that is absolutely against our Constitution. And it's really unfortunate that the DNR leadership has weaponized their conservation officers into harassing, basically, residents from protecting their private property from being flooded. Okay, Chet and I, we're in the south edge of Roxy and I's lawn. He doesn't look real thrilled with my project right now, but I guess it's not all about him right now. So we were just at Erickson Flowage right here, and now we're across the street at our house. Now, just as a recap, the DNR and the USGS, they would like us all to believe and have us believe, based on their 2 studies that they've conducted in the mid-'80s and most recent one is 2019, is that County Road F here, groundwater doesn't cross that. That doesn't happen. And groundwater is not affected by these flowages. And public water, or water on public property, doesn't cross onto private property. You know, I don't think the water knows that it's public and has to stay on state land. It just does whatever it wants to do. But that's not what they like us to believe. So, I guess with that, let's talk about precipitation too. Precipitation, which they say is the cause of this localized flooding, I partially agree with that, by the way, because, you know, if the groundwater table is elevated and saturates everybody's soil to a high degree based on the flowages, and then you get rain, you're going to get more water. I mean, pretty common sense to me. Yeah, you're going to get more flooding when you get rain, when your ground's already saturated. So anyways, going back to rain, everybody would agree that we had a very, very dry year. Considered a drought by a lot of people. But I don't know many people that actually keep track of precipitation. We do have one neighbor that's very, very close to me here and lives in the study area. He also has a basement that gets flooded. Well, not since midsummer of 2020 it hasn't. But that's his hobby. When I call him and ask for information regarding the precipitation levels and so on, he'll call me back and give me a detailed report. We are caught all back up with precipitation for the year. So we do not have a less amount of precipitation at this time of year. I want to come back to this map that I have again. Something that I think is really important to remember when we talk about precipitation saturating the ground with groundwater is that the whole Crex Meadows, you know, not only this area, but even further east, the groundwater moves west towards the St. Croix River and it moves south to the Wood River. It all comes this direction. And we're going to talk about that a little bit when we get to groundwater quality. But all the elevations of water and these artificial bodies of water here, every drop of rain that falls goes this direction. So when you saturate our property, we're not only dealing with the rain that falls on our property, we're dealing with all the rain that falls over here as well, because it's moving that direction. So that's a really important thing to remember when we talk about precipitation and how it affects private property. Well, here's a groundwater test well that I put in. Before we talk about that, I'll talk a little bit about this trail. You can see that my trail is flooded there partially. And, you know, with the water going up and down over the years, you know, I've seen the water much lower than this as well. Roxy and I have the expectation to use our property as we see fit. We shouldn't have to worry about the ground being saturated with water and affecting our property. I would say over the years that flowage has probably filled in with sediment quite a bit. And they just keep putting boards in to raise the water higher and higher to get up to overcome the sediment that's in there. So we finally gotten to a point where they keep putting boards in to a point to where it's affecting the groundwater table and affecting us. That's not right. Okay, back to this well. This is one of 3 wells that have been installed like this, north up along County Road F. They were pretty much put in with the purpose of monitoring groundwater real close to the Crex Meadows. The DNR has been given access to each one of the 3 wells. What the residents asked of the DNR before putting in boards in Dyke 6 and Dyke 9 was to come to these wells and measure the groundwater elevation in them prior to putting boards in. Then as they put boards in, they can monitor the groundwater level to see if they're affecting us negatively. They rely on the USGS studies to say, well, yeah, it doesn't affect you guys. Well, we're not really asking the DNR to believe what we say. And we'd ask that they don't believe just what the USGS study says. We'd like them to measure these. They can see from themselves what's happening. Simply not taking us up on our offer and putting boards in across the street, that's an act in poor faith by the DNR. So let's talk about this a little bit. I have 15 areas where I test groundwater elevations at. I check them pretty much weekly. July 22nd, right after we had our dry spell during the summer, I took water elevations. And here recently I took them again. Well, since July 22nd, 13 of 15 water test sites I have show a decreased amount of groundwater of 3 to 6 inches as a range. There's 2 test wells that have increased water in them. This is one of them right here. The other one is in the northwest corner of Roxy and I's property. So this one shows 23 inches of increased groundwater elevation. The well down the other side of the 40 shows an increase of 2 inches only. Well, 40-acre parcel that's square is a quarter mile. 23 inches elevated here, 2 inches elevated on the other side of the property, that's a difference of 21 inches. 21 inches, when you convert that to feet, is 1.75 feet. 1.75 feet times 4, because a 40-acre parcel is a quarter mile, is 7 feet. The 1990 water study, as well as the 2019 water study, estimated that the groundwater hydraulic gradient in this area is 6 to 8 feet per mile. Well, pretty darn close, right? So I think the USGS did a good job in calculating what the groundwater downward hydraulic gradient is. So, no question that Erickson flowage, putting the 2 feet of water in there, has definitely affected Roxy and I's property. I thought we should add a little bit of information on long-term wells that are still in operation right now by the USGS. We're going to talk a little bit about a long-term well that was installed by the USGS in our community. And that well is located on the corner of Guile and Bistrom Road right here. Still in operation today. It's very nice of the USGS to install that. I think Megan, the head of the study, actually was the big driver for that. But it's located 2.36 miles away from Dyke 6 flowage. The USGS groundwater website, which I have up on the screen here now, the black square, that is the long-term well I just pointed out. This is the Webster, Wisconsin well. And this is the Trigo well, WB41 they referenced in the study. So going back, I downloaded the most current graphs off the USGS website. This is the long-term well, the one that I pointed out on this map over here. You can see May of 2020 when they took the boards out, it's 2.36 miles away. So water didn't start dropping until, it took a couple weeks because it's so far away. But anyways, the boards came out, water dropped like mad. And then we had some, precipitation and so on, which is all good. And now we're back down again. But there's a big drop here. If you look at this being at basically 1.5 feet below ground level, it dropped all the way down to 6 feet below. That's quite a bit of water. And keep in mind that Dyke 6 flowage right now is at about an elevation of 932. And at the start of the study, they had around 935. But I've seen it as high as 937.8. So it adds up pretty good to what you see here. Now the Trigo well, WB41, referenced in the most recent study, they have that listed on their website at a 0.2 of a foot scale. So it makes it look very similar. But if you put it on a foot scale, like the other well is, you can see that line's pretty flat. The Webster well, which they didn't reference in the study, shows the same sort of thing. They got 0.5 foot scale there, so it's not so out of whack. But the red line would be if it was on a 1 foot scale. So, the graphs on the USGS websites, they even show, they confirm for the residents what's happening. And I do want to mention, I sound a little negative about the USGS, But Megan and Mike, they were really great to work with the USGS. And their center director, John Walker, had a call with him, and he struck me as being a pretty honest guy too. So I don't know how many hands these studies go through, but I highly doubt that those 3 individuals with the USGS would do anything to hurt the scientific facts of the study. Well, at our last town meeting, the town board voted to issue a letter to the DNR requesting the obstructions to be removed from Dyke 6 and Dyke 9 flowage. I don't know if they've wrote the letter yet or not, and who knows? Maybe the DNR will listen to that, maybe they won't, but our town certainly supports the residents in this effort. And, there's some confusion on whether you go by statute 31.02 or if it's chapter 88, .90 here. But 3102 sounds good if you're not affecting people in a negative way. 88.90, to me, looks like it's pretty clear. Whenever any natural water course becomes obstructed, so that natural flow of water along the same is retarded by the negligent action of the owner, occupant, or person in charge of the land in which the obstruction is located, the owner or occupant of any land damaged by such obstruction may request removal thereof. Blah, blah, blah. Well, the big thing is here is the obstruction, if it's natural, provided I give 6 days of notice, like if it's a beaver dam or something, I can go in there and I can remove it without fear of being trespassed on the property. But if it's not a natural obstruction, I'm assuming we got to come up here to part 2. And that's where you get your town involved, and the town board can make the decision on, whether or not the water is affecting a neighbor's property. And if it is, they can order the obstruction removed. It doesn't say natural or not. And one thing that's kind of important here is in the definitions, it says land or lands means any real property or interest therein, whether privately or publicly owned. So I don't know if it's chapter 31 or if it's chapter 88. I don't really care, to be honest with you. I just want the residents to be treated fairly. And they're not being right now. Residents in the area need security. They want to know, what does the DNR think they can get away with? Because everybody, there's people building houses right now and digging basements, and they're going to need some kind of security to guarantee that the DNR ain't going to flood them out again. This is a copy of the original letter that I had sent to Kyle Anderson, the property supervisor, from July of 2018. He was pretty new in that position at the time. Prior to that, it was Steve Hoffman. And then July 23rd, 2020, this is the resident letter that all kinds of people signed. And by the way, it isn't like husband and wife signed it, and people didn't sign it if they had multiple parcels. This represents about 90% of the property in the study area. And here they were asking to do a private water study or support a private water study over the fall and winter of 2020, because after the 2019 study, the DNR flooded us out again. Then this one is pretty recent. This is from August. And the residents are very disappointed in the DNR with their thought process of increasing the water in Dyke 6 and Dyke 9 again. And the DNR, I don't know how seriously they took that. But when you start looking at statute 31.02 and talking about protecting property values and all this kind of stuff, boy, they sure don't care about that. I mean, Roxy and I's property was just put into a FEMA floodplain in 2008. So, that doesn't help our property values at all. And there's a lot of other statutes and natural resources regulations that are being violated regarding drinking water. So I don't know where this is going to go, but I'd really like to see the DNR reach out and get an agreement in place with the landowners so that we can get that satisfaction of knowing that the DNR understands where we're coming from. And we need to stop having these sort of games being played with people and their personal property. It's really unfortunate. Well, I think everybody knows I've studied pretty hard on this project. I've pretty much immersed myself in it. I really wish I would have had more foresight on it and made water quality the bigger part of it. If I had taken water tests in our well water back in 2018, that would have been great to have those. Back in February of 2021, Roxy and I sent in samples of our water. And that was after the boards were taken out of Dyke 6 for quite some time. And our water improved dramatically. So we took a test after seeing all the improvements. Well, at that time, the level of tannins in our water in February, which was an improvement, I think, was 1.4 parts per million. And you can see the recommended amount is 0.04 or less. And for those who don't know, tannins, they're decaying vegetation and organic matter, and they are awful. They stain like crazy, stains that you can't get out. It creates really poor tasting water. And when it comes to other things in our water, our iron, we had moderate corrosion, by the way. The SLI was, or the LSI was moderate corrosion level, which is something that'll really be tough on your hot water heater and well pump and all that stuff. And our iron was 19.22. Manganese was high. Silica was high. Pretty bad stuff. When the DNR let me know that they're going to put boards back in, well, actually, when they started putting boards back in, we took another water sample. Here just this past August 29th, we took them. Well, I'll tell you, we've seen a decrease of 5.5 parts per million of iron. And the LSI went down to mild corrosion, which is really nice. And the big story with it is detectable tannins. There weren't any. And this explains why Roxy and I have not had such terrible staining in our house. And I don't know if you've dealt with tannins before, but it's almost like an acid. I mean, you can't get them stains out of anything. So we've had some really positive experiences. It's not just groundwater flooding. And as I stated before, when you put groundwater where it wasn't before, you're also changing the groundwater quality. And you know, I've found that to be true in the DNR water study guide, as well as the basic groundwater hydrology study guide that the USGS has made available. Now, I mentioned that I talked about statute 31.02. That's what this is. This is what the DNR says that authorizes them to flood our property, to operate that dam over there at Dyke 9 flowage as well as at Dyke 6. And this kind of blows me away. I can't even believe they came up with this. 31.02, powers and duties of the department, meaning the Department of Natural Resources. The department, in the interest of public rights and navigable waters, to promote safety and to protect life, health, property values, and economic values, may regulate and control the level and flow of water in all navigable waters, and may erect and may order or require blah, 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 benchmarks, blah, 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 and dams. Well, I can tell you, holy smokes, they sure aren't promoting safety. We've had flooded roads over this, and heck, there's a lady that even wrecked her car driving through over by Paul Staveney's there. And to protect life, health, and property values, economic values, certainly the history of Dyke 6 flowage and Dyke 9 flowage doesn't do that. You may be looking at this from a bigger perspective, like from a statewide perspective, but, you know, I got to tell you, I've never seen a boat or a kayak in Erickson flowage. And, you know, I live right here. We've been here for 26 years, and I can't honestly say if I've ever seen anybody duck hunting over there. It's a very small wetland area. I think it's pretty sad that this is what they're using when they're causing us such problems. So I want to mention that. That's terrible. Now, I mentioned that I thought it was kind of a on-purpose effort to mislead the public. Now, let's go, basically, we're going to go to the 1990 study here quick, because I think this is a pattern that the DNR has developed about rewriting studies so that they, instead of being impartial, they actually benefit the DNR for whatever objective it is they have. And I want to mention that we got to kind of remember that government is basically there to serve the people, not the other way around. And it kind of feels like the other way around to me. Now, in the 1990 study, they talk about groundwater quality in the section on page 13. And I won't go through that whole thing and bore you to death. But look right here, where we're talking about groundwater quality. See how the text looks like this? And then all of a sudden it looks kind of goofy like that? And if you read underneath that, you can see what was written there before. And then over here on page 15, there's like a whole paragraph missing right here. That's kind of weird. But before I jump into that further, In 2016, the DNR did a water quality assessment that talks about iron transport in water and how dewatering flowages actually will take care of that issue. Well, I'm going to tell you, when they did the 2016 study, I think they buried that study. They didn't want anybody to see that. Try to Google that on the internet. Try to find it. Good luck. But this one you can find pretty easily on the internet. And you'll find if you get the pages 14 and 15, you'll see where it looks goofy like that. Well, this one right here, this is the same study. This is the original one that was distributed here in Grantsburg. This was given to me by a guy that retired from the DNR. And he has the same sentiment I do regarding groundwater levels and groundwater quality in the Crex Meadows. Now, if we turn to pages 14 and 15, and this guy here, let me get to it, you'll see something. Look at here. There's where this is the actual sticker. They retyped it and stuck it on there. And here, they just put like a piece of, a label over it. And basically, this 1990 study came to the same conclusion that the 2016 study did. But they didn't want the public to see it, so they kind of nixed it. And that's too bad. These studies cost a lot of money. We're not supposed to be modifying them like that after the fact. And pretty frustrating. The DNR absolutely knows that the iron concentration levels in the groundwater here are affected by the Crex Meadows. There's no question about it. In the northeastern corner of the Crex Meadows, per the 2016 study, it's shown in there that 2 parts per million for iron. By the time you get over to our place here and farther south towards Grantsburg, the iron gets up to 45 parts per million. Well, that is a lot of iron. And water softeners generally can only take out about 15 parts per million. So definitely with that passage they covered up in the 1990 study, they knew they were affecting groundwater then for the residents. And it's really shameful that that was changed. Well, it looks to me like Chet has pretty much had it. And this is kind of concluding our update on the water project here. Next spring, I'll hopefully have another update for you. Thanks again for watching, and don't be afraid to call me with questions. I'll leave my information at the end of the video.